Windsor, the oldest and largest continually inhabited castle in the world. For 1,000 years, it's been the symbol of Britain's royal dynasties. For the Queen, this is a palace like no other.
The Windsor Castle is her home. It is a family home as well. And she feels very comfortable there.
1,000 rooms, hundreds of staff, billions of pounds worth of paintings and fine furnishings, 5,000 acres of parkland.
It's a great stage on which the whole royal business can be acted out.
It's also where the royal family hide their secrets.
There are documents and letters there that I think probably every historian would give their eye teeth for.
It's been the Queen's home for 80 years. In this series, we reveal what's really happened behind the castle's imposing walls. We begin with the toughest decade of the Queen's reign, the 1990s.
The royals suddenly found that they were being analysed, criticised, ridiculed.
When an unprecedented disaster threatened to destroy the castle and bring down the Queen.
5 hours on, the flames still rising from the turrets, a whole royal treasure house at risk.
We reveal how the Queen stepped in to put an end to Charles and Di's marriage.
When the Queen was going to write something as significant as that about the future of the monarchy, it could only come from the desk at Windsor.
And we discover how in the 21st century the castle has played a crucial role in reviving the popularity of Britain's royal family. In 2016, Elizabeth II was Britain's longest-serving monarch. She also turned 90 years old, making her the oldest in the nation's history. To celebrate these two great milestones, there was only one place she wanted to be: Windsor.
Windsor is at the core of all things royal. So when the Queen turned 90, the celebration focus was in Windsor Castle. That's where she was.
She went into the town outside the castle to meet her loyal subjects and was given a cake from Bake Off's Nadia Hussein. Since her childhood days 80 years earlier, Windsor Castle has been a safe haven for the Queen and played a central role in many of the key events of the nation.
When people talk about Buckingham Palace as the family home to the House of Windsor, they're wrong. Windsor Castle has been the hub of royal history down the ages. It's where the royals have met, married, been dispatched and hatched.
It's been the Queen's weekend home ever since she was crowned.
Fridays are always an exciting day at Buckingham Palace because the Queen is preparing for her weekend at Windsor, her country retreat. So after lunch on Friday, we're busy packing up all her bits and pieces, the things that she might need for the weekend.
Paul Burrell worked as the Queen's personal footman at Windsor Castle for 11 years.
It's a half-an-hour drive down the M4 from Buckingham Palace. That's what the Queen loves best. She can get into her little car, unmarked, get into the traffic, into the flow, and be in Windsor in half an hour, in the countryside, with her dogs and her horses.
And there's plenty of room for all of them at the Queen's country retreat. With an impressive 1,000 rooms, the castle covers a whopping 13 acres. From the air, the Round Tower sits in the middle of two distinct precincts. The castle's lower precinct is dominated by St. George's Chapel and houses some of the castle's 350 staff. But the Queen lives at the other end of the castle in the upper precinct. Here, the Queen's private apartments include the royal nursery, the Queen's private study, dining room, and of course her bedchamber.
The Queen likes a very simple, traditional look, a very old English look. So the minute you go into the private apartments in Windsor Castle, you automatically feel at home because you've seen that kind of decor in many houses across Britain.
But Windsor Castle is much more than a very large, very fancy private home. It's also a state building unique in the world.
Windsor Castle has been at the core of this monarchy, this 1,000-year monarchy, since its conception.
First constructed as a fortress just after the Norman invasion, Windsor Castle has 1,000 years of royal history within its walls.
William the Conqueror built Windsor Castle, and so when you're in the castle, it's not just about Elizabeth II, it's about all the monarchs stretching right back to 1066.
From the Norman conquest, through Henry VIII, Queen Victoria, and now the Windsors, every British royal has regarded Windsor Castle as their seat of power.
Windsor Castle represents Great Britain plc. It is the place that visiting potentates want to see above all else, and that's why it's used so often as a backdrop for these great state occasions.
And the Queen's 90th birthday at Windsor was also a state occasion. It was marked by a visit from the most powerful man on the planet. But even when the President of the USA drops in, he has to respect the House rules.
When Obama came to see the Queen, she instructed American security that the helicopter should not land on the lawns at Windsor Castle, and she reminded them that this was her home and she didn't want her lovely green herbaceous border messed up.
And to emphasize how much it was their home, once the Obamas had landed, the 95-year-old Duke of Edinburgh personally drove the president up to the castle for lunch. It was a special picture designed to have impact around the world. Formal but relaxed, a popular queen totally at ease. This was an astonishing transformation, because the 90th birthday triumph came at the end of an extraordinarily dark chapter in the Windsor story. Back in 1992, royal popularity had plummeted, and Windsor Castle itself was almost completely destroyed. Friday, the 20th of November, 1992, was the Queen's 45th wedding anniversary. A day to celebrate. But the day was rapidly to become one of the worst in Windsor history. At 11:20 that morning, a work light, which had been left too close to a curtain, started a fire inside the Queen's private chapel at Windsor Castle. Within minutes, the 300-year-old room was ablaze. At 11:36, the alarm was raised. 5 minutes later, the Queen's press officer at Buckingham Palace received an urgent phone call.
I'm in the press office, and I got a phone call from BBC Radio Berkshire saying, "Can you confirm the fire at Windsor Castle?" And I thought, fire at Windsor Castle? What fire at Windsor Castle? I left the palace probably about 12:05. I could see from the motorway black smoke billowing, and if you could see a lot of black smoke, you know you've got a big fire.
At 12:25, 50 minutes after it started, Arbiter arrived at the castle and found 225 firemen and 39 engines battling an inferno.
There is a hive of activity going on. There's a human chain moving stuff from the Royal Library. Lots of artifacts had to be saved, hundreds of years old, and this they were doing. They were moving a carpet, an incredibly long carpet, which was almost like a snake.
In the thick of it, the Queen's second son coordinating an evacuation.
I came up to see if I could help, and yes, I could. let's get as much as we possibly can out.
And he was very good because he was able to tell the military what to do, how to do it, and where to take it.
It also fell to Andrew to phone his mother with the bad news.
What was your mother's reaction? Her Majesty was shocked.
The Queen was due to arrive at Windsor about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's when she did arrive. And immediately she put on a long sort of barber coat, headscarf, as she always does, and was briefed by the Deputy County Fire Chief, David Harper, who gave her a sort of full background of what was happening and how they were tackling the fire.
The news wasn't good. As the Queen got her briefing, the fire had moved through the Crimson Drawing Room and St George's Hall, two of the most important rooms in the castle, and showed no signs of slowing. The following morning, the full scale of the disaster became apparent. The fire had burned for 15 hours and needed 1.5 million gallons of water to put it out. 100 rooms had been damaged, 9 completely gutted.
St George's Hall, for example, the damage to that was from the smoke and from water. The walls had been charred, the ceiling had completely disappeared, the roof had disappeared.
The fire at Windsor was the worst disaster in the castle's 1,000-year history. That Friday was the Queen's wedding anniversary, but her husband, Prince Philip, was away on an official tour.
The Queen was all alone and looking terribly sad, and one of Her Majesty's coachmen told me that he was grabbed by this almost irresistible urge to go up to her and to put his arm around her because she looked on the verge of tears. Suddenly it brought it all home to him that she was not just the lofty sovereign. This was a mother, a homeowner who was seeing her favourite house going up in smoke.
The fire at Windsor couldn't have come at a worse time for the Queen. 1992 had already been a dreadful year.
The Queen called 1992 her Anna Cerebralis, and she did so for a reason.
In March that year, the Duke of York separated from his wife, Sarah Ferguson. In April, Princess Anne divorced. In June, a tell-all book about Princess Diana revealed explosive details about her marriage to the Queen's eldest son, Charles, and his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. In August, pictures of a topless Fergie having her toes sucked appeared in the tabloids. And just 2 weeks before the fire, the heir to the throne had been embarrassed in a phone-tapping scandal.
At the end of '92, Prince Charles's stock was at its lowest ebb. Not only was he seeing another woman, and that his marriage to this fairy tale princess, Princess Diana, was a sham, but also he'd been caught on tape in making these salacious remarks to Camilla Parker Bowles.
He had hit pretty much rock bottom. There were people shouting, "You should be ashamed of yourself," when he went on public engagements around the East End. I remember it quite vividly.
10 months of scandal had destroyed the reputation of the royal family and even shaken public belief in the whole idea of monarchy.
We weren't turning into a generation of Republicans all of a sudden, but people were questioning the point of the royal family like never before.
As bad as the Queen's year had already been, it was about to get worse. Just 6 hours after the fire at Windsor, the Secretary of State for National Heritage spoke to the press. In a few words, he managed to turn what had been a personal disaster for the Queen into a crisis for the monarchy.
I gave a sort of general sitrep on what I had seen and what the conditions were, and then made myself available for questions. And of course, the immediate question was, who is going to pay for it?
The responsibility for the Royal Palace is one which falls to my department, the Department of National Heritage. We will be taking the castle back to the condition at which it was.
Peter Brook's promise was committing taxpayers to stump up the estimated £40 million bill, which went down like a lead balloon.
The country was in a recession. Many services were being cut, and yet we were being asked to foot the bill for this 40 million salvaging repair job, and yet we, the public, got no particular benefit of it. It was for the Queen and her family. It was their home, but we paid for it.
Who do you think should pay for the restoration?
Not the public.
Why should we pay? Government don't pay, we pay.
There was a huge backlash amongst the general public saying, well, we're not going to pay for this. The royal family can pay for this.
The Queen was often at that time on the Sunday Times list, always number one as the richest woman in the country. There's a sense of why should people in a council house in Barkingside pay for this woman's residence in Royal Berkshire.
The fire at Windsor had exposed a popular misunderstanding about what Britain's sovereign was actually worth.
They had her down as owning all the royal palaces, including the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, you name it. It was the royal palace, she owned it. She owned the royal flight, the royal train, the royal yacht. She owned the royal collection, she owned the crown jewels, none of which does she own.
In reality, the Queen does not now own Windsor or any of the other royal palaces and estates. After her coronation, she, like every monarch for the last 200 years, signed a contract handing over all crown lands and buildings and their vast rental income to the government for the rest of her life. In return, she receives a large annual allowance. So legally, Windsor is the taxpayer's responsibility. But with the family's reputation at its lowest levels in a generation, the public didn't care.
I used to like them a lot at one time, but now each time you read all what's going on, you think, well, you've gone right off of them.
I think a whole lot of them should be strung up.
The Queen realised she needed to act. She needed to rebuild both Windsor and the reputation of the monarchy, and fast. Something had to change.
She doesn't like change. She finds change unsettling, like all of us. But she is prepared to embrace change, albeit slowly.
It's not the first time that public hostility has forced radical action from the royals. In 1917, the Queen's grandfather faced a similar problem.
During the First World War, anything German became extremely unpopular. This presented a difficulty, of course, for the royal family because the name of the royal house was Saxe-Coburg-Gotha.
The truth is, it was a very Germanic name, but even worse, Gotha bombers in the First World War were dropping bombs on London. So there was a sense that they had to do something to change that perception of being a Germanic royal family.
King George V very sensibly understood that he needed to change the name of the dynasty, and he very sensibly chose Windsor. They didn't choose Buckingham, and they didn't choose Sandringham or Balmoral. They chose Windsor because Windsor is quintessentially English.
75 years on, public opposition to paying for repairs to Windsor forced Elizabeth to come up with an equally radical plan.
At that stage, the royal institution closes ranks and has a real hard sink. And what you see is a concerted effort to win the hearts and minds of the British people.
A week after the fire, the Queen called a secret meeting of key family members and trusted advisors. They formed what's known as the Way Ahead Group.
The Way Ahead Group effectively is an Uber focus group of royal household members that would discuss the way ahead. What is the strategy for the next few years? Because they were conscious that they had an image problem.
That meeting of the Way Ahead Group ended with a plan, insisting that the taxpayers foot the bill for the fire was now out of the question. So the Queen offered to raise the money by opening up her London headquarters to paying visitors.
It was announced that the Queen was going to open Buckingham Palace up to the public to fund the repairs to Windsor Castle. It was a masterstroke in many ways. It diffused the whole situation. And of course, the backstory is that they'd been planning this anyway, but timing it just after the Windsor Castle catastrophe was a brilliant stroke.
In August 1993, just 8 months after the fire at Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace opened its doors to paying visitors for the first time. It was a storming success. Nearly 400,000 people paid £8 a ticket to take the tour. Money was pouring into the Windsor Restoration Fund, and public hostility to the royals began to soften. 2 years after the devastating fire at Windsor Castle, a huge restoration program got underway. The fire had destroyed a fifth of the building, and hundreds of craftsmen were working to return it to its former glory. The castle could be repaired. In 1994, the marriage of Charles and Diana could not. The bitter war of words between the royal couple plunged to new depths. They'd been separated for 2 unhappy years, and the relationship had completely broken down. Charles's popularity had sunk to a new low, with the public taking Di's side.
She doesn't need him anymore.
He should give up all thought of being king. He should become like a commoner.
As heir to the throne, the Prince of Wales desperately needed to win back public respect. A primetime ITV documentary fronted by Jonathan Dimbleby gave him the perfect opportunity, and Windsor Castle the perfect backdrop.
When a documentary was first mooted for the Prince of Wales to do, it was to be around basically the Prince's Trust and his other charities. And this was really going to be a documentary about what a jolly fine fellow he is.
All had been going well with the filming, but when Dimbleby arrived at Windsor, the whole project seriously backfired.
He's in St George's Chapel, and Dimbleby is standing next to him and asked him the question about him and Camilla Parker Bowles and the breakdown of his marriage to Diana, and did he commit adultery? And he confessed that he had done.
The film was broadcast on the 29th of June 1994 and shocked even royal insiders.
My eyes came out like organ stops. I couldn't actually believe what I was seeing or what I was hearing.
By seeming to blame his affair on Diana's behaviour, Charles had upped the ante in what had been dubbed the War of the Waleses. And Diana hit back immediately in a television interview.
Diana went nuclear with her interview with Martin Bashir. She suggested that Prince Charles wasn't fit to be king, shouldn't be king, she was the Queen of Hearts. It was a damning and devastating attack, not just on Prince Charles, but also on the institution of the monarchy.
For the Queen, Diana had gone too far. By saying Charles was unfit to be king, she'd challenged a fundamental principle of monarchy. Succession to the throne is not decided by popular opinion.
As the Queen absorbed the full import of what was being said, she realised that she had to stop this at the pass.
Events were just rolling over them, and the monarchy was being ridiculed, traduced, and she had to seize back control.
In December 1995, in her study at Windsor, the Queen sat at her desk and began to write 2 of the most difficult letters she'd ever written.
The only way really to grasp the nettle was to order a divorce and therefore separate the House of Windsor from Princess Diana.
I think that when the Queen was going to write something as significant as that about the future of the monarchy, it only came from the desk at Windsor.
On December the 20th, 1995, the 2 letters were dispatched from Windsor Castle. One was sent to the Prince of Wales, and the other, via a uniformed courier, to Kensington Palace.
And I could see the Windsor Castle crest and the Windsor Castle paper. I knew exactly what it was. The letter read, after long consideration and consultation with the Prime Minister and the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think it's probably best if you divorced for the sake of the country. And signed Elizabeth R. It was a royal command from Windsor Castle.
Now, Windsor Castle is the home of many significant royal events, none more so than her decision to write this letter to protect the fabric and the integrity of the monarchy.
The Queen's intervention ended the public battle between her son and Diana. 8 months later, on August the 28th, 1996, the divorce was granted and was welcomed by the public.
Oh, it's bad time. It's a complete farce. We should have done it some time ago.
I think it's sad but necessary.
With Charles's divorce, the Queen hoped that the darkest days of her reign might finally be behind her. But within the year, the nation and the royal family were stunned by the sudden and brutal death of Diana. That fateful Sunday, the crowds gathered in London to mourn the princess. But the Queen was not at Windsor that August weekend. She was on holiday, hidden away at Balmoral in Scotland, and she chose to stay there.
She rarely misjudges the mood of the people, but there's no question that in that week in 1997, after Diana's death, there was a misjudgment.
Our Queen should be here in London with her people. This is her nation, and they should know how all her people feel about Diana.
It's not the first time a tragic royal death has led to a monarch's popularity nosediving. 150 years ago, when Prince Albert died at Windsor Castle aged just 42, Queen Victoria became a virtual recluse.
After Albert's death, she wanted to retreat into herself. She wanted to lock herself up. She wanted to be at Windsor and no one see her. And yet everyone was expecting to see the Queen. They wanted pictures of the Queen. They wanted her out visiting. And this caused a lot of problems for her. There was a lot of complaint, a growth in Republican feeling, because people said, why is she the widow of Windsor? Why is she hiding herself away? Why is she doing this? She's our Queen.
Perhaps mindful of her great-great-grandmother, on September the 5th, 1997, Elizabeth II finally returned to London.
First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
When she came down and she spoke to people outside, comforted well-wishers, she then acted as her archetypal position demands. That is to say, she was the mother to the nation.
Being on show and being seen to care, the Queen had made that day a turning point in her fortunes. The worst years of her reign were over. There would be new tests, but none as tough as this one. She could look forward to her 50th wedding anniversary with optimism, not least because she could celebrate this one at home at Windsor. On November 20th, 1997, 5 years to the day after the fire that had destroyed it, the restoration of Windsor Castle was complete. It had cost £37 million, money the Queen had helped to find, and for Elizabeth, it was money well spent.
I know the Queen is very pleased with it. She said the other night at a party here that it was the best golden wedding anniversary present she could possibly have.
Elizabeth had restored Windsor's magnificent Edwardian interiors and had also given her home a very personal 20th century touch.
There is an Elizabeth II stamp on the restoration of Windsor Castle, a new design for the ceiling of St George's Hall, a new configuration from what was the private chapel into what is known as the Lantern Lobby now.
The reopening of Windsor Castle ended what had been a difficult 5 years for the Queen. She'd never lost her dignity, and what's more, her eldest son, Charles, could now concentrate on being a king in waiting. But the Queen's difficulties hadn't all been dealt with. She had 2 other sons, and now they were beginning to cause problems. They needed to be brought under the royal wing, and fortunately, Windsor has pretty big wings.
Windsor Castle sits within a great landscape like a kind of aircraft carrier, you know, overseeing this vast area of land.
The Windsor Castle estate is enormous. It occupies thousands of acres, including forests, golf courses, polo grounds, Ascot Racecourse, and 2 huge parks. The 5,500-acre Windsor Great Park is open to the public. But tucked away in the northeast is the Royal's own very private 650-acre estate. It's called Home Park. It's a private playground for the family where they play golf, relax in gardens, and hang out in some of the grandest homes in the country.
You have Frogmore House, you have Royal Lodge. So there are dotted throughout many other royal homes. They're not palaces, they're royal homes.
In 1997, the Queen moved her youngest son, Edward, just 6 miles down the road from the castle, into a very grand mansion called Bagshot Park.
Bagshot is this very impressive and imposing sort of Gothic house that used to belong to one of Queen Victoria's sons. It's very impressive. A little bit like something from a Hammer House, I have to say, from the outside.
Built in 1870, the huge Bagshot property has 120 rooms and 40 acres of private parkland. It's a comfortable retreat for a prince who had never really found his place in the world.
It must be really difficult being an also-ran in a royal family, because what is the role of a minor royal? In one way, you just want him to go to work. Why don't you just get yourself a job? But it's not maybe quite that easy.
And it wasn't. Throughout the 90s, Edward had tried hard to find one.
He was very keen to show that royals can earn their own living. And there was a lot of criticism at the time about them being paid for the public purse, not earning their own living. And he was very keen to change that.
But he didn't really seem to know what he actually wanted to do. First, he tried the traditional career in the services. He joined the Marines, but quit after 3 months. Then he tried to conquer London's West End and fell at the first hurdle. And eventually, he started his own TV company.
He's caught between a rock and a hard place. Call me Edward Windsor, that was what his gimmick was at that time. I'm playing Mr. Windsor. But these big television productions he was interested in making wanted to make a huge big deal of the fact that they got the Queen's son behind them. They didn't want Edward Windsor, they wanted HRH, Prince Edward. And in the end, he decided he had enough.
Edward retreated to Bagshot Park. With his newly acquired title of Earl of Wessex, a wife in Countess Sophie, and 2 young children, he could live the comfortable life of a country squire and minor royal, shielded from the public glare. Edward wasn't the only prince given refuge in the Queen's backyard.
Windsor is very much Prince Andrew's stomping ground.
Since 1987, Prince Andrew had been living in the grounds of the Windsor estate at Sunninghill Park, 5 miles from the castle. The 2-story, 12-bedroomed mansion had been a wedding present from the Queen. But after his split from Fergie and leaving the Navy, he'd found himself homeless and in search of a job.
He just came up with this idea that he should be our travelling trade ambassador, but that did not turn out to be a good fit. He had an unfortunate manner, let's put it like that, when dealing with people we wanted to do business with around the world.
I think that Prince Andrew can sometimes be rather a bore. He's not full of obvious charm.
This was a prince who expected to be treated like one when representing Britain abroad.
He wanted such a luxurious version of a visit, way in excess of what would happen for the Prime Minister or any other minister, that you kind of thought, is this really worth the effort?
Criticism of her son eventually forced him to quit and badly stung the Queen.
Andrew is the Queen's favourite son, and they're terribly close. She probably speaks as much to Andrew as to any of her children, and he's as close to her as she is to him.
She realised that Andrew needed somewhere very private to live, somewhere comfortable and close by, where he could be kept out of the public eye. In 2002, the death of her 101-year-old mother provided the Queen with the perfect solution.
Royal Lodge remains a great favourite of the Queen because it was where she went every Sunday to see her mother, and where she continues to go almost every Sunday without fail. After church, she'll drop in to see Andrew.
The huge 17th century mansion is the jewel in the crown of Windsor's private royal homes. It's also the closest. It's only 3 miles down the road from the castle. Even better for the Duke, it's very close to the castle's private golf course.
Andrew loves Windsor. Of course he loves Windsor. He plays golf. He loves the golf course, which is on the Queen's doorstep. He can play golf anytime he wants.
With his 75-year lease on Royal Lodge, the Queen's favourite son can quietly enjoy his golf at Windsor for the rest of his life. With her 2 younger sons safely packed away, the Queen could look to the future. It was time to train the next generation, and fortunately, the most important was already a Windsor resident. At the start of the new millennium, the Queen had a problem with her eldest son. Stubborn, headstrong, and seemingly unrepentant about his split with Diana, Charles had lost the affection of his subjects. But his son was hugely popular. At the time, William, second in line to the throne, was a Windsor local. As a pupil at Eton College, which is on the edge of the Windsor Castle estate, he'd spent years just a short stroll from his granny's house.
The Queen always has tea, a set tea, with a cup of tea and a biscuit in her oak drawing room. And on Sundays, she'd say to me, would you set an extra place setting? Because William's going to walk up the hill from Eton. So William would walk up the hill from school with his policeman and have a cup of tea with his granny. And I know exactly what she was doing. She was beginning to introduce him to Windsor as the seat of monarchy.
She did use those occasions to begin his education in the art of kingship, if you like. In many ways, the Queen has almost given up on Prince Charles. Charles was such an independent heir to the throne, determined to do things his own way, whereas William has proved to be more malleable, perhaps. He's certainly been more open to his grandmother's approach to monarchy, and he's likely to be much more off the chip of her block than a chip off his father's block.
Like his dad and his uncles Andrew and Edward, William chose Windsor to celebrate turning 21. And just back from volunteering in Africa, he added his own little twist.
It was an African-themed party, so everyone dressed up as elephants and giraffes and zebras and lions and gorillas. You know, I've no doubt there were several gorilla suits in there.
The 300-strong guest list included all of the most senior members of the royal family.
Prince William's 21st birthday party at Windsor Castle was a very, very big deal indeed, and was bound to attract a lot of media interest and interest from the public at large. And sprinkled amongst them almost inevitably are people who are pranksters or interferers in one way or another.
Happy birthday!
One such person was Aaron Barshak.
Aaron Barshak turns up wearing sort of a white turban and a long black beard. From there down, he was wearing a sort of a pink dress, so he was sort of like Osama bin Laden in drag. He then walks around the side wall of the castle, and he's able to get up and drop over the wall inside the castle.
Remarkably, the cross-dressing trespasser was then able to roam the castle grounds unchallenged.
CCTV from inside the castle confirms this. He walked about, he explored, he went to the kitchens, he went into this library, he went into this sitting room and so forth, and he's seen, if you like, having a good look around.
At about 11 p.m, Barshak bumped into a contractor working at the castle.
And Barshak persuades this chap that, presumably, that he's a guest who somehow got locked out or lost from the party. So the contractor swallows this story and sort of assists Barshak.
Moments later, Barshak was within touching distance of the birthday boy.
He actually walked up to the prince, put his arm around him and planted a kiss on his cheek. Now, that's all good knockabout fun, except that we're in an age, and we were in 2003, where he could have been somebody wearing a suicide belt.
The lapse in security at Windsor Castle outraged the family and generated sympathy for the shy young prince. Over the next 2 years, the family built on the popularity of the younger Windsors, gradually erasing the memories of the dark days of the 1990s. So much so that in 2005, even the relationship that had destroyed public trust in the monarchy could be publicly celebrated.
It's extraordinary that we should witness the Prince of Wales married to Camilla Parker Bowles after all that's happened.
Just 8 years after the death of Diana, Charles married the other woman in Windsor in full public view.
As soon as she appeared as his bride in Windsor on those steps where the Queen was seen mouthing, well, that went rather well, I think people accepted it.
As the Queen turned 80 the following year, it seemed after a challenging decade she could finally look forward to a more comfortable old age, spending as much of it at Windsor as she could.
Windsor is the place the Queen considers home above all others, and in fact, as she's got older, it's the place she's retreated to more and more. She cuts short her working week at Buckingham Palace to spend more time at Windsor Castle.
Windsor Castle is a great royal stage, but for the Queen, it's the place where she grew up and raised her own family. When it was saved from destruction, so too were 80 years of her personal memories. It's no wonder that now she's in her 10th decade, she plans to spend more time in her favourite home, Windsor Castle. Next time, we go back to the Queen's childhood at Windsor.
These two princesses had this gigantic castle to explore just for themselves.
And reveal how a teenage Elizabeth used her role in a castle pantomime to impress a visiting prince.
She fell head over heels in love with this very handsome man.
And how at the age of 25, her life changed overnight.
She was a wife, she was a mother. She's got all the responsibility of sovereignty on her shoulders.